gotta share everything.
Okay.
Like my daughter, whenever we go somewhere and do pictures, she never sends me the picture. Okay, so here's my center back. And this will have the 1-inch zipper extension. So I'm gonna just line it up here. Tracing around it. And just remember when you go back to your pattern that you need to make sure that you indicate the seam allowance. Don't add extra seam allowance or it won't fit back into your garment. So I'm gonna come down a little bit more than 2 inches. And if your tracing around the pattern is not that great, go back in with your rulers and curve and correct it. So a 1/4 inch seam allowance here at the neckline should put. And 1/4 here. I'm gonna just mark my corners. So I'll remember that I have seam allowance here. The shoulder was 1/2 inch. Armhole is 1/4. And then she has a 1-inch zipper extension back here. Okay, so I know I want 2 inches below my seam allowance here. And what we usually do is serge that seam allowance edge.
Would you serge it for like a finer fabric, like something?
No,
like if you were using like a silk or
you
like.
could hem it. If it's something that expensive, sometimes we just don't even do, like you do a lining most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to find a silk garment that has a facing in it. But like those little blouses do. And sometimes they'll do, it may not be serged, but they'll have a marrowed edge, which is that really fine and skinny.
Like
because that you don't see under the thin fabric. So. Which we can do it. Mr. Perry showed me how to adjust these. You can do it on the serger. It's just a setting that you can. Maybe we can figure that out this semester, John.
I know, I still want to use the machine in the other.
Yeah, the zigzag and the cover stitch. Okay, so I know I went my 2 inches here from the seam allowance, and I'm just gonna kind of loosely. What I want to do is, if on this garment we had a facing that went all the way to the center back, this would cause some stress in here. It's the same reason why they put a pleat in the back of your coat. So for movement, that underlayer doesn't restrict you. So what you want is at least a 2-inch facing just to finish off the garment, but you want to keep it clear of like, I want to keep it clear of my mid back and not have any stress across my armhole because she's going to have a bust in here. So it'll be 2 layers of fabric fighting against each other. So you want to minimize this facing shape. But you want to make sure on the edges that you have enough. Sometimes in some garments like tank tops, you'll see they use even less than the 2-inch facing. It just depends on the garment and depends on the fabric. Okay, so I'm just gonna go in and kind of clean up my lines that I've drawn in here for my facing. You may just have to erase some of my loosey-goosey lines in here.
Isn't it common sometimes for some garments to just have a facing in the front?
Well, and if it doesn't have a back neckline, like I've seen some halters with no back, it might just have straps. There wouldn't be a need. But then they would have a facing on the side. So I mean that could happen. So this is my center back edge here. We're gonna make a grain line on this one because this one's cut on the straight grain. And this is the back facing. How many am I cutting of this one? It has a grain line.
This is the back, so you cut
It's the back, yeah. So self 2 over the side, and then we're gonna cut 2 in interfacing. I can't write. Okay, so then seam allowance is already included, and then she can go ahead and just cut this out in fabric and an interface. Okay, so essentially that's your facing. The reason why I said no sleeves or anything just for this one is so I can show you how to do this, okay? And then later you'll do a garment with sleeves, something with a collar, because sometimes your collar needs a facing. So I just want to show you some construction, because that's really our weak point, because we don't have a lot of construction classes. So I want to make sure in this class you at least try each of these finishes once, so when you do your own designs you can be a better designer as